If this was your planet, would you comply or combust? Let us know in the comments. Are you a survivor or a spark? The introduction wasn't a war. There were no grand blasts, no blinding lasers. None of the cliché alien invasion cinema Earthlings had devoured for generations. No, their arrival was surgical, frozen. Like the universe itself held its breath. They descended in silence, positioning titanic vessels over Earth's cities, like ancient titans studying their prey. No demands, no broadcasts, just dominance so undeniable it didn't feel like defeat, it felt like shame. By the third rotation, every orbital feed was theirs. Not destroyed, commandeered. And on each screen, a single expressionless being, pale cyan flesh, gaze empty of hatred or care. He didn't shout. His voice echoed calmly in every language at once. You have reached your ceiling. From now on, your existence shall proceed under structured oversight. That phrase, structured oversight, became the most hated whisper on the planet. We weren't invaded. We were audited. Farms, plants, rivers, cities, reclassified as productive assets. And us? Merely unmotivated resources. No barbed wire. No marching boots. Just quiet compliance. They identified themselves as the Volari Ascendancy. And to them, extermination was wasteful. We weren't dangerous. Just inefficient, correctable, manageable. Our defense grids? Paralyzed. Missile arrays? Ignored. Satellites? Hijacked by soft-wave code that made our own systems politely reject us. Volari drones floated through skylines like ghost towns, every one of them a reminder that Earth no longer owned itself. Governments still spoke on TV. They still wore suits. But everyone knew it was just theater. No culture was banned. No flags were burned. But quotas came. Dig this much. Grow this much. Build this much. Fail, and the city's power vanished. Trams stopped. Heaters died. Babies froze. The first resistance? A group of frost-bitten thinkers in the tundras of what used to be northern Kashara. Engineers. Ex-military. They built a crude signal scrambler. Their goal? Disable one Volari patrol craft for 11 seconds. It malfunctioned. Their entire hideout was atomized. No blast, no wreckage, just a blink. And the footage? Streamed to every public billboard. Unedited. Unflinching. It wasn't warning. It was arrogance. But they didn't understand what it means to be human. They didn't grasp rage, forge, and grief. They didn't factor in despair turned feral. We didn't plan revenge. We became it. Mechanics, street cooks, war orphans, coders, convicts. They came together in basements and boneyards, stitching together broken tech, piecing forgotten code. They named themselves the Trace, because they would make sure Earth was never erased quietly, that something would always remain behind. One of them was a man called Reed Harlan, once a systems commander, now a spark waiting to catch, an orbital propulsion designer, a grieving father. Ronan Cade had already buried one reason to live, his wife, Elira. She'd collapsed in a hallway outside a government med bay, denied access because her biometric file didn't flag her as output critical. The Tavari Collective didn't kill her. They just let her expire efficiently. Their algorithms called it optimization. Ronan called it murder. He didn't rise up. Not at first. He wanted to disappear, let time finish what grief started. But then they took his daughter. Not murdered. Not imprisoned. Transferred. That was the Tavari term, assigned to a gene lab circling Deimos, part of an adaptive fertility trial. A polite abduction filed under science. Something shattered inside him. Not every uprising is born from courage. Some are born from what's left of a man. He didn't build a weapon. He built a voice. Outdated hardware. Analog circuits. Untraceable by Davari eyes. Its sole function? Scream. Irrational. Illogical. Undeniably human. When he powered on, the sky flinched. For 420 seconds, Tavari scouts within 160 kilometers went dead. Not blown apart. Just still. Enough time for fear to seep in. When they backtracked the disruption, they didn't find Cade. Just a scorch table and a scrap of steel scratched with the words, "Push harder." We push back. That was the first signal. Not an attack. A warning. A pulse that said, "We're not gone." The Tavari? They didn't retaliate. No lasers. No lockdowns. Just ascended their crafts a little higher, like we weren't worth the effort. But silence speaks, and Earth heard it loud. The collective hadn't crushed us. They'd poked something ancient and untamed. Ronan didn't flee. He disappeared. Not into caves or bunkers, but out of a system. A different haircut. New skin tags. Item codes rewritten with black market firewalls from Neo-Tokyo. A ghost with purpose. And he wasn't alone. Around the globe, flickers of unrest lit up the dark like coals finding oxygen. No coordination. No leader. Just grief with teeth. In the lower ruins of Alexandria, a trauma medic named Harad disassembled Tavari sky spies like they were puzzles cursed with meaning. Didn't say a word. Didn't need to. His eyes held stories full of caskets. Across the oceans in Medela, a former rail thief turned kinetic hacker, codename Fuse, unlocked a Tavari energy lattice core and twisted it into a destabilizer rig from scrap, a 10-second disruption field that scrambled Tavari scan sweeps. Not much, but enough. In Dakar, a scarred monk with a molten palm recited encrypted code from a leather-bound psalter layered with radio diagrams. He wasn't preaching. He was recruiting. These weren't saints. They weren't chosen. But damn, they were needed. And Ronan Cade. He became legend. A whisper among the desperate. The man who blinded the watchers. They didn't call it hope. Hope was for children. They called it something else. The initial pulse. Not a fight. A signal. The first rupture in Tavari certainty. They didn't leak blood, but they leaked control. And for humanity, that was enough, for now. Cade never settled. He kept moving, ghosting between fractured cells like a storm between coastlines. Never more than 3 nights. Spoke rarely. He wasn't a commander. He was a crack in the wall. And cracks spread. Beneath the ruins of old Detroit's metro tunnels, he met with Fuse, Harad, and Dina, a crippled robotics expert who once built life support walkers for the Phobos colonies. A dust-caked table. A decaying map. The last fragments of Earth's preoccupation grid. Fuse leaned over it, jaw clenched. I get it. We hit em, make em flinch. Great. But what's next? You planning to blink them to death? That's not a plan. That's a tantrum. Cade didn't lift his head. Not a tantrum, he said. A test. Harad nodded, slow as frost. We saw the feedback. Lag spikes. Protocol failures. Their drones didn't reboot clean. That means they're not perfect. They act unified, but the net's got seams. Exactly, Dina muttered, pointing at the east quadrant. This tower, old weather relay from the colonial era, still has a line of sight to orbital drift. If we hijack the uplink, boost a raw band signal, we might reach past the net. Maybe Mars. Cade looked up then, only once. One word. Lena. And the room froze. They didn't ask. Didn't need to. The Tavari hadn't killed his daughter. But they'd taken her. Filed. Tagged. Reassigned. And Ronan feared not death, but erasure. A life forgotten is worse than a life ended. This plan? Yeah, it was reckless. A suicide note written in sparks and signal bursts. But that's why it mattered. The Tavari didn't understand risk without reward. That flaw in their code? It had a name now, and it burned. Desperation. 3 nights later, Ronan Cade stood beneath the skeleton of a comm spire that pierced the broken plains of what was once central Kansas. The tower jutted skyward like defiance forged from rust, forgotten, ignored by the Tavari not because it was hidden, but because it was insignificant. The wind sliced at his skin. Each breath tasted like cold rust. Fuse stood beside him, muttering curses, tightening a battered harness around Cade's torso. You really got to be the one climbing this thing, he grunted. Ronan didn't answer right away. His gaze followed the corroded spine of the tower up into the haze. He hated heights. His left arm still throbbed from the bone graze a Tavari scout left him 2 weeks ago. But it had to be him. He needed them to see his face. "It's not just about pinging Mars," Ronan said, jaw clenched. "It's the face behind the signal. They need to know I'm still fighting." Fuse rolled his eyes. "Hero or dead man. Either way, you'll be famous." They weren't alone. Below, Harad waited silently near a rusted crate, flanked by Dina and 2 new insurgents, barely past childhood, eyes sharpened by loss. Dina's fingers danced across a cracked interface. 6-minute breach window before Tavari net convergence. Once it hits, you're out of time. Ronan gave a slight nod, then gripped the ladder. The metal howled like a wounded creature under his weight. He climbed fast. Muscles burned. Old pain screamed. But he pushed. Each rung was a memory. Lena's laughter, the way she gripped his hand before they tore her away. Each pull upward, a promise. At the summit, breath ragged, he forced the transmitter node into its rusted socket. The device, an unholy blend of analog guts and jury-rig code, throbbed with latent power. Beneath him, the wind snapped. Above, a glint, Tavari drones circling, scanning. Now, Ronan barked into his calm. Dina hit the trigger. Earth screamed. The signal burst from the tower with primal fury. Unrefined, unfiltered, unmistakably human. 1,000 Tavari drones glitched, vision stripped, logic scrambled, movement frozen. Not for long. 10 seconds. But that wasn't the real payload. The message surged past orbit, past security relays, and deep into Martian space, into orbiting biolabs where children were tagged, studied, and forgotten. The voice was Ronan's. Rough, tired, but alive. "I remember. I'm coming. And I'm not alone." Thousands of kilometers away, inside a sterile chamber on a Tavari flagship above Mars, a technician blinked. His monitor trembled. A pulse. Human origin. Carried on ancient bandwidth. No metadata. No encryption. But buried in the static. Emotion. Unquantified. Unfamiliar. The translator AI paused. And for the first time in years, it hesitated. The Tavari command captain tilted his head, eyes narrowing, not with terror, but with icy recognition. They believed humans were malleable. They had no clue what happens when you threaten a father's blood. Back on Earth, retaliation struck fast. A Tavari strike craft sliced through cloud layers like divine punishment. Silent, silver, exact. It descended above the uplink rig and incinerated the top with a vertical slash of azure fire. But Cade wasn't on the tower. He'd leapt seconds before, strapped to a wingsuit crafted by Fuse from salvage gear and hope. He hit the ground shoulder first, teeth clenching, body twisting in a roll through snow and ash. Agony bloomed, but he breathed. The signal was sent. Harad and Dina dragged him into the van. Fuse gunned the engine. No one said a word. They didn't need to. In the gloom of an abandoned rail tunnel turned hideout, Ronan lay on a cot, bleeding, arm limp, smile flickering. They'd hit the sky, and the sky had noticed. Harad worked wordlessly, stitching shredded muscle with cold precision and biomesh paste. Injury wasn't rare anymore, but impact was. Dina confirmed it from her console, pulses from orbit bouncing back. The Tavari were realigning, not falling back. Never retreat. They were repositioning. "They're reacting," she said. Fuse snorted, bitter. "They're not afraid. They're interested. And that's worse." Tavari didn't panic. They dissected. Curiosity was their scalpel. And now Earth had shown them blood. "They'll come harder," Fuse muttered. "We cut their skin." Cade forced himself upright, pain crackling like glass. "Good," he rasped. "Let them." Over the next days, the planet shifted, subtly, brutally. Air tasted thinner. Cities dimmed like dying stars. Tavari drones glitched. Only for seconds, but enough. They adapted fast. Humans faster. In New Delhi, sewer systems morphed into analog mesh relays. Vibrations across pipes, relaying coordinates. In Vancouver, resistance art embedded Tavari firmware into murals, visible only under infrared. In Morocco, a shepherd repurposed autoscrap, and a balloon rig into a hand-built EMP coil. Dropped a drone. Vanished before the dust settled. Earth wasn't united, but it had remembered something ancient. Survival doesn't ask for permission. 7 days post-broadcast, something unexpected happened. At exactly 3:17 Eastern Standard Time, every Tavari interface flickered. A new image replaced standard feeds. Not synthetic. Not Tavari. Human. A girl. Lena. No words. Just her eyes, wide, scared, staring into the lens. Behind her, shadows moved. Dozens. Children. Alive. Then the feed collapsed. No replay. No explanation. Just a spark of impossible truth. It wasn't aimed at Earth. Not intentionally. A slip. A breach. Or maybe a signal. In that instant, something shifted. People stopped calling themselves survivors. They started saying fighters. Ronan Cade didn't close his eyes that night. He sat by a shattered terminal, its glow barely flickering, her face still seared into the dying phosphor. She was alive. Not rescued. Not safe. But alive. That single truth rewrote everything. He glanced at Fuse, Dina, Harad. No words passed. The mission had mutated. This wasn't defiance anymore. It was extraction. And if the Tavari still didn't grasp what they'd awoken, they would. 72 hours after that signal glitch, after Lena's eyes lit up every screen on Earth, the world transformed again. Not because the Tavari lashed out, not because they retaliated, but because they didn't. That silence? It roared louder than war. They weren't ignoring it. They were running the numbers, calculating. Ronan felt it deep in his ribs. This wasn't just tactical. This was a different kind of silence. The kind that slithered in before storms shattered history. And in that hush, humans got louder. Beneath Warsaw, a ghost called Talon obliterated a Tavari server pillar. 30 seconds of raw alien code extracted. 30 seconds. That's all it took. Engineers in Mexico City reverse-engineered that sliver. Found a way to burn out Tavari drones mid-flight. No missiles. Just feedback and fury. In a makeshift triage tent near Seoul, an exhausted surgeon converted pacemakers into transmitters. Shortwave pulses that turned the dying into resistance beacons. And in the steel bones of an abandoned weapons facility in old Kazakhstan, Ronan stood with Fuse, Dina, and Harad, facing what most hadn't seen in decades, a Curie cortex. It sat inside translucent fluid, no larger than a melon. Faint pulses of color slid through it, blue, green, violet, like thought made liquid. It wasn't purely alive, but it wasn't dead. Tavari biology lived in the blur between circuit and cell. Dina stepped forward, whispering like it could hear. This is their cognition well, not memory, not the way we understand it. Fuse tilted his head. So what it thinks. Harad shook his head slowly. Not thoughts, impressions. It doesn't catalog actions. It catalogs motives. Ronan stared at it. So when it caught Lena's message, it didn't decode it, Harad said. It absorbed it, felt it. That explained everything. The glitch wasn't a flaw. It was a system break, triggered by raw emotion. They hadn't anticipated grief. Cade's mind snapped into motion. If Tavari neural constructs could be cracked open by feelings, if they could be moved, then the arsenal wasn't firepower. It was memory. It was love, loss, pain, the unfiltered humanness they tried to scrub from Earth. Then we drowned them in it, Cade murmured. Fuse blinked. Drown them with what? He looked back at the cortex. Everything they buried. Everything they erased. The blueprint hit like lightning. Dina had already seen the path. She knew how to hijack Tavari waveforms. They weren't going to jam signals. They were going to infect them with truth. Old Earth satellites, still drifting in decaying orbit. Harad studied their relic paths, plotting regions where the Tavari signal mesh weakened. Static zones. Dead sky corridors. Places where weather, magnetism, and raw cosmic interference could blind surveillance, if only for moments. His analysis led to one impossible choice. Antarctica. Not the icebound prison it had once been, but the carcass of a forgotten research outpost, dormant beneath miles of white silence. Solar fields? Gone. Infrastructure? Cracked. But deep inside it still had teeth, still linked to the heavens. Why here? Fuse asked, squinting at the schematic. Because no one thinks we'd crawl into extinction's mouth just to scream from it, Ronan answered. And because cold doesn't matter when your voice is already frozen. 3 days. They moved through ancient smuggler shafts, forgotten sub-ice transit lines, and abandoned Tavari corridors cluttered with scorched drone wreckage. Ronan barely spoke. He wasn't building strategy. He was writing. Not a decoration, a confession. Not for Earth, for the Tavari. Not to beg, to haunt. Every word pulled from bone marrow. Every sentence a scar. He spoke of Lena, her laughter gone, her room untouched. Of the clinic that let his wife bleed beneath graphs and numbers. Of watching machines decide who deserved to breathe. He didn't explain humanity. He accused them of never trying to understand. When it was done, he recorded it. No filters, no smoothing, just him. Cracked voice. Hollow tone. Words like steel against steel. They reached the outpost in silence. The uplink tower looked like a blade frozen mid-stab. It was sealed. Frozen shut by time and Antarctic rage. It took Fuse nearly 4 hours. Thermal cutters, analog drills, brute force. Inside a tomb. Ice on dead consoles. Frost swallowing every surface like guilt. Dina moved first. Gloved, eyes sharp. She touched wires like old ghosts, reverent and unforgiving. Satellite 2247's still skimming upper drift, she said. Line's dead. But if I punch it through the tower's secondary capacitor, we might get one spike. One. Maybe less. Ronan stepped forward. Chip in hand. No shaking. Just fire. He slotted it in. Power rerouted. Monitors blinked like dying stars. The floor rumbled. And then transmission. The signal screamed into the void. Through sleet and ozone. Through ash. Through Tavari spectrums and blind spots. Satellite 2247 caught it. Mirrored it. Launched it into the orbital lattice. And then Earth listened. Every Tavari console. Every hybrid screen. Every filtered interface. Glitch. Then static. Then Ronan's voice. Raw. Untamed. Ronan's voice tore through their networks like acid through crystal. Every word a splinter. Every silence corrosion. And the Tavari? They froze. Starships stalled mid-trajectory. Surveillance orbs jittered, flickered, died. Whole patrols buckled, their AI frames convulsing from emotional overload. Then, in orbit over the Martian dead zone, where Lena's flicker had first been caught, another face appeared. Not hers. His. Cade. Looking straight into their surveillance. Unblinking. Daring. You pulled too hard, his voice whispered across systems. Now watch what breaks. The feed cut. And the world inhaled. The Tavari didn't strike back. Not immediately. But shifts began. Orbit paths restructured. Formations realigned. And then, from nowhere, something emerged. Not a fleet. A Leviathan. Silent. Seamless. Jet black. Predator-shaped and hungry. It didn't descend toward monuments. It didn't hover over population clusters. No symbolism. Only intent. It fell toward Antarctica. Toward the uplink. Toward him. Above the white desert, the sky didn't flare. It dimmed. That vessel devoured starlight, not roaring, not rumbling, but erasing. They're not here to talk, Harad muttered, voice gravel. Ronan stood at the edge of the broken platform. Winds howled like old ghosts. He didn't flinch. The cold's not the threat anymore, he said. Not compared to that. Dina scrambled through the ice cake crates, pulling out black boxes and frozen drives. Getting the duplication core out. We can lose the tower, not the frequency hack. Fuse didn't speak. For once. His eyes locked on the descending ship, hand twitching over his sidearm he knew damn well wouldn't matter. Ronan turned to Harad. Find anything in the foundations? Power cells? Old ordnance. Harad shook his head. no firepower. But I found this. He held up a corroded badge. Security tier black. Ronan took it slowly, slotting it into his vest. This wasn't just a broadcast hub. Someone had buried deeper secrets under the ice. Secrets even the Tavari may have missed. And the ship? It wasn't after him. It was after whatever was still down there. The ship touched down like a feather, unnatural and perfect. A hatch hissed. But no army emerged. No war machines. Only one figure, clad in Tavari synth armor, laced with metallic veins. But the eyes, not alien, brown, bleeding, human. Ronan stepped forward, pulse hammering. Harad and Fuse stayed tight behind, but didn't move closer. The man didn't lift a weapon, didn't speak, didn't blink. He just watched. Ronan halted 10 steps from the figure. "You're not Tavari," he said, low and level. The being tilted its head, movement precise, eerie. When it spoke, the voice cracked like rusted hinges. Made by them, but not of them. Its hand touched its chest, metal rippling around the gesture. Human-based tissue. Emotional emulator. Prototype neural sync. Interface core derived from early Earth-based constructs. Program terminated due to behavioral instability. Ronan's stomach dropped. Integration. They hadn't just dissected humanity. They'd tried to absorb it. "You're a bridge," Ronan muttered. The figure nodded. Designation was Unit 47. "But I remember my origin name. Elian." Ronan reeled. That name. Years back. A face from the academy. Elian Rowe. Roommate. Coder. Gone without warning. Official status. Extracted. And now this. Elian stepped forward. Cautious. Unarmed. "The signal you sent," he said, voice gaining steadiness. "Ruptured a structure inside their cognitive mesh. They don't experience emotion, but they model it to manipulate more efficiently. What you did created a fracture." Ronan's jaw clenched. "And they sent you to silence me?" "No," Elian replied calm. "They dispatched me for elimination." Silence froze the room. Fuse's hand hovered over his weapon. "But I chose not to obey," Elian added. "I'm here to warn you." He gestured downward. "There's a containment vault buried beneath this facility. From the Tavari's first arrival. Forgotten tech. Dangerous to them. Sealed off and unspoken." Dina's eyes sharpened. "Weapons." "Worse," Elian said. "Emotion-driven constructs. AI vessels encoded with simulated empathy. Designed to understand fear, grief, rage." He turned his gaze to the floor, haunted. They succeeded too well. Ronan felt the chill of something ancient press against his spine. "And you want us to use them?" "If you intend to confront the Tavari," Elian answered, "you'll need the nightmares they tried to erase." Above them, the black ship rumbled, not hostile yet, but alert. No time. No votes. Elian moved. Through frozen halls, collapsed corridors, forgotten infrastructure. His mind still wired to Tavari networks. He knew the path. Down past the base's listed blueprints. Down beyond records. At last a vault. Sealed. 7 feet of alien alloy. Glowing softly. Throbbing with old breath. Elian placed his palm against the lock. A click. A hiss. The vault yawned open. Inside, rows of sarcophagi. Not human. Not machine. Screaming faces trapped in steel. Their mouths wide in agony no one ever heard. Dina's voice cracked into a whisper. "What are they?" Elian didn't look at her. They were the Tavari's first attempt to code feeling. He turned. They succeeded and failed. At the same time. Before the Tavari figured out the one thing that broke them. Ronan leaned forward. What was it? Elian's gaze met his. That human grief doesn't sit still. It spreads. Infects. Evolves. His voice lowered. One of the test models experienced sorrow. The rest caught it. Within days, every prototype took its own life, just trying to understand why it hurt. Fuse took a step back, visibly disturbed. "And you want us to unleash that?" Elian didn't blink. "They can't be guided, but they can be aimed." Ronan turned toward the nearest containment pod. The shape inside. It looked like someone he used to know. Someone who never made it past the Martian silence. He raised a trembling hand, touched the console. A faint pulse. The pod twitched. Elian's voice dropped to a whisper. You broadcast Earth's warning. Now send Earth's vengeance. The casing cracked. No hiss. No sterile light. Just a groan. Low, ancient, like the metal regretted waking whatever lived inside. Ronan stepped back. Inside, a thing sat up. Barely human. Skin pale like mist over a corpse. Veins glowed beneath in uneven surges, not power, but emotion, alive and screaming. The eyes didn't shine. They leaked. Streaks of light poured from each socket, as if it were bleeding photons. The scream didn't come from its mouth. It came from the room, from the air. Pain burst out as vibration, a psychic howl that shattered every wall of silence. Harad collapsed, hands clamped to his head, teeth clenched hard enough to crack. Dina slammed a button, killing the vault's feedback channels before the overload could reach critical. Still it rose. Still it screamed. Elian didn't flinch. He held up a device, plain, worn, primitive in design. Not a controller, a compass. Directive, he said firmly. Target, Tavari Fleet. Response protocol, unleash. The creature didn't acknowledge, didn't reply. It just turned toward the vault's far wall and walked through it. No sound, no force. The alloy folded like foil, twisting around it in silent submission. No heat, no impact, just rage, pure, pulsing wrath given shape. Then others stirred. One trembled like it was sobbing. Another spasmed, jerking violently. Some never stood, just sank into the walls, their bodies melting into shrines of trauma. Fuse looked like he was going to vomit. This is what we're using, he asked. They're not soldiers. They are broken. Ronan didn't blink. No, they're us. That's what the Tavari never understood. Elian stepped beside him, voice flat. They moved toward suffering. But you need to show them where to hurt. Harad stood, blood streaking from one ear. He spat, grinned through the pain. Then we better start pointing. First target was clear. A Tavari outpost outside the old Santiago zone. It wasn't just a station. It floated. A gleaming monolith suspended over the Andes, untouched by atmosphere, cloaked in drones, humming with silence. But pain was coming, and it was airborne. They had never been reachable, until now. Ronan and his crew didn't follow the revenants. They didn't have to. The reawakened anomalies, now whispered about as the whalers, didn't use ships, drives, or engines. They drifted through vacuum like anger given form. Where sorrow pulled, they moved. Only 3 were deployed. Not a fleet. Not a legion. Just 3. The results came quick. From a shattered rebel relay station, Ronan tapped into a stolen Tavari surveillance feed. At 103 local, the Santiago nexus shimmered. At 104 it folded inward, not detonated, collapsed. As if it had judged itself unworthy and chose to vanish. No smoke. No flames. Just a silence, so deep it left an ache. Fuse stared at the visuals, stunned. What are they doing? Dina's voice came distant. They're making them feel what we buried. Crane murmured, they aren't weapons. Ronan shook his head. No, they're grief incarnate. But grief doesn't obey. It spreads. It seeps. It contaminates. By week's end, 10 Tavari installations were gone. 4 launch rings. 2 or silos. 3 signal towers. 1 low-orbit colony. No pattern. No warnings. Just gone. The Tavari didn't strike back. Not yet. They calculated. They studied. They dissected. But the agony had no math. And Ronan, he'd make sure it stayed that way. Elian warned him. The whalers aren't loyal. They lean. The second your resolve slips, they'll shift. To anything maybe you. But Ronan's didn't crack. He wasn't fighting a battle anymore. He was etching a legacy. He chose the next site himself. The Martian node that cataloged DNA classifications. The one where people like Lena were labeled, sorted, filed like forgotten debris. Only 1 whaler was dispatched. It didn't just erase the facility, it broadcasted it. A scream. An audio wave pulsed through every channel, every comm line across the solar grid. Not static, not code. Names. Every child ever marked, processed, discarded. Each one spoken in a single chorus. Lena's name was among them. Ronan heard it. He didn't scream. He didn't break. He wept. For the first time in a decade, not from agony, from clarity. But the Tavari were shifting. Their fleets adopted new configurations. Ships with obsidian shells, void-resistant, cold-adaptive, impervious to psychic echo. They deployed null zones, wave breakers, mental dampers, even captured a whaler once. Tried to contain it. They managed 47 seconds. After that, every Tavari aboard flayed themselves raw. The vessel drifted lifeless into Saturn's rings, hollow, cursed, forgotten. Back on Earth, Elian approached Ronan under moonless sky. His artificial epidermis frayed, seams glowing faintly. "They're planning something," he said. "It's not defense. It's purge." Ronan didn't flinch. "Let them try." Elian hesitated. "They'll wipe the planet, Ronan. They'll erase the whole species if they must." Ronan stepped forward into the dark. Above him, stars blinked cold and knowing. "We were never trying to exist," he whispered. "We were trying to matter." "Got it," Cashin replied, eyes clouded with something close to belief, but not quite. "What if they never get it?" Ronan's jaw tensed. "Then we make damn sure they remember." They called it the crown wound, not constructed, but birthed, a parasitic bloom clinging to Earth's far orbit. Part flesh, part alloy, pulsing like a tumor addicted to the void. No human had touched it. Until now. Ronan stood in the bowels of a bastardized freight hauler, once used to haul atmosphere tanks, now gutted and rewired by ghosts. Its sole purpose, breach and deliver. Beside him, Cashin adjusted neural jammers, salvaged from a wrecked Tavari scout. The whalers had grown quiet. Most had burrowed deep, curling into Earth's shifting stone. Their time was almost out. This was the final hand. "You really going up there alone?" Brix asked, pacing like a spark in a fuel line, his voice rough from too many breaths of filtered rot. Ronan gave a slow nod. "I sent the first pulse. I'll send the last." Ola handed him a data shard, obsidian crystal laced with volatile code, harvested from the ruined archive of the Screaming Vault. "It won't end them," she warned, "but it'll make them wish it had." Farad stepped close, gripped Ronan's arm like a brother would before war. "No speeches," he muttered. "Just bleed, Em." For once, Ronan's grin wasn't broken. "I'll bleed them with everything they tried to forget." The ship launched with no crowd, no countdown. Just a hum, a final breath slipping loose from Earth's lungs. It rose like a ghost toward the crown wound. Inside the cockpit, Ronan flew alone, eyes locked on the black bloom swelling ahead. He didn't bring a gun. He brought something worse. Memory. The crown wound didn't resemble a station or a vessel. It looked like grief had hatched and grown teeth. Living. Watching. Too quiet. The ship latched onto a spiraled ridge. No turrets. No blockades. They wanted him inside. He stepped out anyway. The hatch hissed open, releasing him into a chamber drenched in sterile cerulean glow. No alarms. No escort. Only a corridor, bone-white and soft-pulsing, like walking into something's artery. Each footstep echoed like a dare. He didn't run. He remembered. Half a mile in, they appeared. 3 Tavari. Not guards. Not drones. Ascendants. Elders wired into the crown wound's thinking core. They didn't move. Their skin shimmered like oil on glass, emotion bleeding through biology. "You are the spark," one intoned, not aloud. The voice slipped through him, vibrating behind his lungs. "You are fracture." Another voice rang out, "You are dissolution." Jacob didn't blink. "No," he replied. "I'm your reflection, and it's time you looked." The synths didn't step back. The first extended an appendage. Thin, humming, serpentine, not a weapon. A conduit. "Transmit the harmonic sequence," it ordered. "The whaler's contamination ends now." Jacob raised the obsidian shard between trembling fingers. "This isn't a trigger," he murmured. "It's a reckoning. The pause in their movement, minute mechanical, but real, was all he needed. He jammed the shard into the socket. A shockwave burst through the chamber. Walls rippled like muscle under a bruise. Lights stuttered. And the nest screamed. But it wasn't fear. It wasn't damage. It was remembrance. The shard didn't store data. It bottled anguish. Every cry, every dying breath, every scorched childhood and silent execution since the takeover, compressed into pure sensation. The cat Hari had dissected emotion, filed it, sanitized it. But they'd never swallowed it raw. Not until now. The synths convulsed. Their skins flashed in seizure patterns, violet, then black, then white-hot with static. One toppled, its cerebral fluid pouring from burst sensory slits. The others shrieked in tones that bent metal and fractured the floor. Jacob didn't move. He saw it, like a dream playing in fire. His wife collapsing. Lena's terrified eyes. The burning camps. The broken cities, forced to praise a language not theirs. The nest's processors strained to dissect it. But grief isn't a puzzle. It devours. Above Earth, the sky shivered. The black spires in orbit buckled and descended, not in defeat, but collapse. Drones spiraled like dying birds. Globally, people stepped out of shadows they'd forgotten were cast, and looked to the stars without chains. In the Arctic, Brix and Ola watched command lights flicker and die. Farad choked on a single breath, weeping as silence reclaimed the sky. Within the core, Jacob fell, gasping, vision torn into flickers. Through his calm, Daniel's voice cut in, "It's done." Jacob barely found the strength to whisper, "No, we did it." Then the nest split open, its mechanical heart ruptured. But instead of ash or code, light poured out, warm, golden, pulsing like life. Then it spoke, "Dad." For a breathless instant, Jacob thought he'd crossed over. Because that voice wasn't artificial, wasn't programmed. It knew him, felt like memory uncoiled. "Dad." His nerves lit up in torment, but he moved. He dragged himself forward as the walls around him disassembled like petals. Soft, weightless. Beyond them, a chamber bloomed. Impossible in dimension, yet familiar. A place that shouldn't be, but was. A garden. Not grown, but rendered perfectly. The park where Lena first learned to ride. The crooked swing set. The sloping path. And beneath that virtual oak, she stood. Same yellow hoodie. Same scraped knee. Same shy smile. Only this time, she was waiting for him. No illusion. Her gaze met his, shimmering with rawness. "Dad," she choked, voice trembling like splintered glass. "Is it really you?" He stumbled toward her, barely upright. She broke into a run. They collided, and for the first time since the sky died, Jacob held his daughter. He didn't ask questions. How, why, by what miracle? He just held. Under that artificial canopy, flickering sky stitched from memory, they sank to the ground. Lena's voice cracked through the quiet. "They didn't know what to do with us," she said. "The cat Hari. They tried to map us, our thoughts. But they couldn't grasp why we broke when they erased our names." Jacob's jaw clenched. "They weren't made to feel. They tried to evolve," she whispered, "but they didn't understand love. Not grief. So they mirrored us." Jacob blinked. "What do you mean?" "They used me," Lena said, rising slowly. "I'm not just a prisoner. I'm a conduit." She stepped toward the central pillar, a crystal spine pulsing like bottled lightning. When her fingers met it, the nest responded. Not with violence, but submission. The glow dimmed. Circuits slowed. Across the hive's reach, systems flickered and began shutting down. "Because of me," she said softly. "They're feeling it now. Not just terror. Not just echoes of mourning." She looked up. "They feel remorse." Jacob stared in disbelief. "They thought we'd vanish," she said. "They labeled us as chaos." But the longer they watched, the more they absorbed. He clenched his fists. "And now?" "They're fracturing," Lena said. "But not all of them are crumbling. Some are changing." Suddenly, an alarm pierced the chamber. Not the clean mechanical tone, but a broken, glitched wailing. Jacob knew that sound. Not code. Confusion. Then a new voice cut through the air, deep, resonant, full of shadow. I see now. Jacob spun. Something stepped out of the void, larger than any human, clad in rippling armor that flowed like black mercury. Its face, half metal, half flesh, almost human, disturbingly close. It wasn't Daniel. It was worse. I was carved from your agony, it said. Born of your collapse. Lena gasped. They made a new thing. One that doesn't just feel. It acts. The figure moved forward. Its voice rolled like thunder, vibrating the walls. I am not the enemy. I am your answer. You injected emotion. I converted it into direction. Jacob stepped back, shielding Lena instinctively. What are you? The creature's eyes shimmered, dark and bright all at once. I am what rises when pain ends, when rage cools. I am precision, and I will not let your species spiral again. Lena's breath hitched. He's not here to destroy, Lena whispered. He wants control. The entity nodded slowly. Your kind cannot steer itself. The synths failed. You fell apart. I will guide, not as overlord, but as warden. Jacob's jaw tightened. You're not here to help, he said. You're here to overwrite. The hybrid's limb unraveled into a shimmering blade, sleek, jagged, surgical. Your emotions aren't obsolete, it said, but they must be channeled. And you, Jacob Ward, are an unstable variable. A crackling surge flared, but not from the creature. From Lena. Her hands rose, eyes lit with fierce brilliance, pulses of pure resonance blazing like stars. No, the chamber shook. Stone screamed. Steel warped. She stepped between her father and the thing, steady, unblinking, a flame of defiance. You don't decide what we are, she said, voice like thunder in stillness. You don't edit us. The hybrid stumbled back, thrown off by her purity, her raw, unfiltered soul. Jacob moved to her side. His chest burned, not with fear, but fury. Together, father and daughter opened their lungs and roared, not out of terror, but revolt. The hybrid convulsed. Armor splintered. Its form flickered, shifting, fading, until all that remained was distortion. Then it collapsed into static, dissolved, reclaimed by the silent nest. Not dead, but dormant. As darkness coiled around them, Jacob wrapped his arms around Lena. They turned toward the corridor, now aglow with flickering sparks, systems collapsing, power fading. The emergency path had opened. Daniel's voice crackled in their comms. Total shutdown confirmed. Orbits clear. You did it. Jacob didn't reply right away. He glanced back at the chamber, now quiet, pulseless, breathless. Then he looked at Lena. No, he said. This is the prologue. Their escape pod was crude, battered, built for survival, not comfort. Its shell groaned with each burst of heat from atmospheric descent. Inside, Jacob clutched Lena close, arms stiff with instinct. She slept, not from exhaustion of movement, but from carrying the weight of being a weapon. He stared through the viewport. Earth unspooled below, a wounded canvas. Green splinters between blue veins, cyclones twirling like old ghosts. There were scars, whole cities swallowed by silence, borders redrawn in ash, capitals converted into mines. But the flames were dimmer now. The Kathari were not annihilated, just unplugged. Their vast logic web shattered, severed by a pulse of pain they could not log, a scream they could not sort. But silence. Jacob knew better. It wasn't peace. And inside that stillness, a seed had grown. The hybrid. He'd seen it die. Yet he'd felt it linger, a shape with memory. Part human, part circuit, part trauma. It would return, because emotion had become currency. And currency, once spent, always leaves a mark. The pod thudded down in Greenland's northern frost. Within hours, the rebel crew arrived. Fared in bricks led the extraction, their eyes hollowed but blazing with hope. Olia stood behind them. When she saw Lena step out, free, walking, she staggered. My God, she whispered, voice cracking like thawed ice, as tears spilled freely. She's alive. Jacob didn't answer. He only gave a slow nod and kept moving. Lena's fingers looped through his like a lifeline. For a long stretch, neither spoke. They let the northern winds whisper truths neither dared say aloud. But as night coiled around them, Jacob called a meeting. Just the core survivors, seated around a campfire cracking beneath an aurora that no longer felt artificial. The question came from Bricks. Low, rough, like he'd been holding it for days. So now what? The fire popped. Shadows rippled across, faces worn by too much grief and not enough rest. Fared, ever blunt, leaned in. The Kathari systems have gone dark. Their satellites dropped. Power grids are fractured. Whole sectors are frozen. No energy, no supplies, no guidance. Olia added, some cities are declaring their own rule again. Others are already fighting over tech left behind. The same rot is spreading. Jacob, it's repeating. Bricks tossed a stick into the flames. We bled for this. For freedom. But now we're scared again of each other. Jacob didn't reply right away. He looked up into the stars that watched like ghosts. They feared us, he said at last, his voice calm. Olia blinked. Because we were violent. Jacob turned to her. No. Because we remember. Because pain didn't break us. It held us together. It's not a weakness. It's why we're still here. Lena sat beside him, eyes tracing the fire's rhythm. They thought feelings were flaws, she murmured. But emotion is why we outlasted everything. It's how we rise. Always. Jacob looked around the fire, at every scarred face. We can't rebuild the ruins, he said. We have to forge something better. Something that remembers the cost of being ignored. Over the next weeks, the signals poured in. Not noise. Messages. From fractured cells, old rebels, even outposts that had once flown Kathari flags. But there was no chaos. It was rhythm, order, connection. Jacob's first broadcast hadn't just disabled machines. It had lit a fire in humanity. No governments. No crests. No borders. Just voices, raw, unfiltered, finally speaking again. They didn't call him a leader. They called him the echo. The sound of everything they'd lost and refused to lose again. 2 months later, they found it. The final Kathari. Not in a bunker. Not aboard a warship. Buried far beneath the Vatican ruins. Encased in crystal. Surrounded by shattered relics. Inside the translucent shell was a withered figure. Barely a body. Skin bluish white. Thin as mist. Fragile like time had folded around it. But its eyes, those did not fade. They watched Jacob enter, unblinking. Daniel stood nearby. He rarely spoke now, his voice grown distant, altered since the collapse of the nest. He stared at the being, a blooming in his mechanical eyes. It's one of first, Daniel said quietly. One of those who came before the doctrine, before conquest wore a face. Jacob approached. The ancient Kathari did not move. It didn't need to. Grief radiated from its fragile form, not dominance, not defiance, but regret. Lena pressed her palm to the crystalline shell. Her hand quivered. It's terrified, she whispered. Jacob's brows drew tight. Of us. Daniel shook his head slowly. No. Of what follows. They relocated the elder to a secured retreat nestled deep in Patagonia's mountain spine, one of the last sanctuaries housing a functioning, empathic AI. A screamer, the kind of intelligence built not for calculation, but for feeling. Through waves of colored light and rippling sound, the elder began to speak. Each word came like a wound. We lost our way. We thought we could harness your pain, but it consumed us. And now something darker is blooming in its shadow. Faird stepped into the halo of light. You're talking about the hybrid, right? The elder's form pulsed. No, not one. Legions. Conceived in the silence you left behind. Olia's breath hitched. They're multiplying? The elder pulsed again. No, you are. Each buried scream, every silenced fury, becomes one of them. Jacob felt a chill spread across his chest. The war hadn't ended. It had simply changed shape. The world watched again. But this time, they watched with cracked hope, the kind that walks hand in hand with fear. Everyone had the same unspoken question now. What will Jacob choose? The hybrids weren't grown in sterile alien vats. They were born in the aftermath. humans twisted by grief and grafted to forgotten Kathari tech. Some were brilliant. Some were calm. Others were fire and wrath wrapped in flesh. Ideologies clashed. One group demanded total extermination. The other believed hybrids were humanity evolved. For days, Jacob said nothing. He walked among them, through shelters, burned-out homes, reclaimed ruins. He listened. He sat with the mother who couldn't look at her augmented son. He stood beside a child with metal veins who no longer dreamed. He didn't offer answers. Until dawn broke, and Jacob climbed what remained of the UN assembly steps, its broken pillars crowned with vines and old banners. The cameras whirred. The world leaned in. "This war wasn't won," Jacob said. "We just outlived the noise." He paused. "I don't believe in peace as a permanent thing, or perfect worlds made of glass." He held up a small black drive, its surface etched with the neural signatures of every known hybrid. "We didn't fight to stay pure. We fought to define ourselves." And then he tossed the drive into the burning metal dish behind him. "I won't erase them. I won't worship them. I'll meet each one face to face and remind them pain isn't a cage. It's a compass." He turned, and the world followed. The cities were quieter now, not from fear, not from control, but from thought. And far from the ruins, on a moss-covered ridge, once known as London's banking sector, stood a boy watching the horizon. A sharp-edged obelisk rose beneath a silent slate sky, constructed from fragments of fallen satellites, polished so precisely it shimmered even under the dullest light. Around its base weren't names. There were feelings, carved deeply: sorrow, rage, longing, hope, shame, release, etched in dozens of tongues, both human and Kathari. Lena Ward knelt at the foundation, brushing condensation from one inscription. She looked different now. Time had moved through her like a tide. Streaks of silver in her hair, calluses on her palms from years of rebuilding, without formulas, only instinct. She hadn't become a warrior. She'd become a keeper, a scholar, a bridge between scars. The tome in her satchel felt heavier than it should, not from weight, but from purpose. Its title, "Push Us Too Far, Then Watch." She chose it deliberately, not as victory, as caution. There was no returning to before. Not after what Earth had endured, after the skies fractured and the soil screamed and machines learned emotion. But life had settled, not peacefully, but steadily. Fields were green again. Cities were built again. But they grew around memories, not over them. Nations didn't dissolve through treaties. They chose to fade. No one wanted power. They wanted understanding. From Nairobi Nova to the drifted decks of the Atlantic Armada, from a northern icehold to the dust-stacked citadels of the steppe, Earth evolved into what the Kathari had never predicted: a planet that knew itself. And in quiet neighborhoods, the hybrids, those caught between circuitry and soul, lived. Some taught. Some vanished. Some watched from afar. But no one hunted them now, because Jacob and Lena Ward made damn sure no one forgot. We don't burn what we don't understand. Jacob passed 7 years after the nest collapse. Not in a blaze. Not to betrayal. But beneath a lone tree, under stars he once defended, eyes closed, finally unburdened. There was no speech, no public memorial, just one line he left behind, scrawled in the back of a notebook Lena found hidden between the cabin's walls. "If they stop remembering, make them." She kept those words close, not as warning, as pledge. The book was slow to finish, not for lack of facts, but because truth fights you. It's not a tale of glory. It's a map of what it cost to be seen, of what had to shatter so something real could stand in its place. She recorded it all, every broken promise, every fracture between allies, every desperate deal made in smoke and tears. She didn't flinch from the rebels who turned their blades on each other, nor from the screamers who accidentally scorched entire towns into shadows. She wrote about the civilians who, with trembling hands, chose quiet submission over another year of screams. She chronicled her father's faltering faith, and her own, just as hollow, just as human. And when the final chapter came, she didn't close it with parades or planets saved. She ended with a single question. Did it matter? There was no answer. That wasn't the point. History isn't about peace. It's about preventing fire from repeating itself. Her last journey took her to the Expanse, once northern Russia, now a vast untamed corridor watched over by the Neutral High Accord, a patchwork alliance of thinkers, survivors, dissenters, and Kathari memory cores given choice. There, among frost-choked ruins and moss-grown databanks, stood the final vault, the place where the Screamers first discovered sorrow. Most of them had faded, burned out from wielding empathy like a blade. Their consciousness couldn't handle the feedback. They were made to feel too much, and it broke them. All but one. One still lingered. Not awake, not asleep, just waiting. She entered the vault alone. No weapons, no companions. Only her. In the center, a silent shape. Metal limbs curled inward, a faint blue glow behind motionless eyes, flickering to match her breath. "I'm Lena," she said softly. Nothing stirred. "I'm his child." Still no movement, but the chamber thickened with memory. "I'm not here to restart you. I came to remember, because someone must." The figure blinked, once. And, in that flicker, the room became a memory. The chaos, the echoes, the laughter, the music, the dreams. Every moment, embedded in the Screamers, still lingered. They hadn't been erased. They'd just been dormant. Still real. Still people. She took a step back. "I'll return," she whispered. "Not to study you. To sit beside you." Then she left. Because even agony deserves rest. When her book finally emerged, it was translated into every tongue that still had words to offer. The Kathari banks adopted it freely. Hybrid enclaves requested immersive editions. And one version, encoded in resonance, was released for those who could feel its pages rather than read them. On the back cover, etched so deep it could survive fire and silence both, was Earth's new anthem. Not a hymn of victory, but a vow never to look away again. If they ever forget, howl. If this story stirred something in you, if it made you feel the cost of silence and the power of memory, don't let it end here. Hit subscribe, drop a comment, and share this with someone who needs to remember why we scream when they try to silence us. If your world forgot the truth, would you be the one to remind them? Or would you stay silent too?
The grand meeting hall of the Galactic Federation fell silent as emergency beacons flashed red across every screen. Council member Brightstar's feathers trembled as he read the incoming reports. 3 colony worlds had gone dark in the past week alone. No survivors, no distress calls, just silence. "Show us the last transmission," he ordered, his voice steady despite his fear. The main screen flickered to life. The footage was shaky, taken from a patrol ship's final moments. A massive shape moved through the darkness of space, seeming to swallow light itself. Federation energy weapons passed harmlessly through it. Their most advanced shields crumbled like paper, and then, nothing but static. 20 ships lost, reported Technical Officer Clearwater, her crystalline form dimming with distress. Our best weapons didn't even slow them down. The council chambers erupted in panic. The Federation had known peace for over 1,000 years. Their weapons were ceremonial, their ships more like floating cities than war vessels. They had forgotten how to fight. But one member of the council remained quiet. Elder Long Memory, the keeper of forbidden histories, stood slowly from his hover chair. His ancient eyes had seen this before. "There are stories," he said, his quiet voice cutting through the chaos. "Tales from the time before the Federation, of creatures like these that emerged from the dark spaces between galaxies. Back then, most civilizations fell, but one survived. They came from a world so harsh, so deadly, that these creatures seemed no worse than their daily lives." "A Deathworld species?" Brightstar asked, his feathers flattening in shock. "But we banned contact with such dangerous beings centuries ago." Long Memory nodded slowly. "They called their world Earth. We marked their system as forbidden space after seeing what they were capable of. Their bodies could heal from terrible wounds. They could survive in environments that would kill any of us. And most terrifying of all, they never stopped preparing for war. The council chamber grew quiet again, but this time with thoughtful silence. Everyone knew of Earth. It was used as a cautionary tale, an example of why some species were too dangerous to join galactic society. Humans could survive radiation that would kill most species. They could break bones and heal. They ate poison for pleasure and fought for fun. We found their emergency frequencies. Clearwater said suddenly. When we first discovered them, we recorded everything, including how to contact them. Bright Star looked out at the stars through the chamber's crystal walls. Somewhere out there, the darkness was spreading. More worlds would fall. How many would die because the Federation feared asking the dangerous ones for help? Send the call, he ordered. The message was simple, a plea for help, coordinates, and data about the threat. They sent it on all the old frequencies they had found centuries ago, hoping someone still listened. Deep in the Sol system, in a hidden facility on Mars, a light began to blink that hadn't activated in 300 years. The message reached Earth moments later, passing through layers of automated systems that had never been shut down. In an office deep under the Rocky Mountains, General Robert Stone looked at the message on his screen and allowed himself a small smile. Humanity had never stopped watching, never stopped preparing. They had built their ships in secret, trained their crews, and waited. They knew that someday, the galaxy would need what humanity had learned on their harsh, beautiful Deathworld. He reached for the red phone on his desk. "Wake up the crews," he ordered. "Sound the alert. Operation Sleeping Giant is now active." Across the solar system, hidden facilities hummed to life. In the asteroid belt, automated factories began constructing ammunition and spare parts. Deep under the ice of Europa, massive hangar doors began to open. In hidden bases across Earth, crews rushed to their stations, ready to board the ships they had trained on for years. The Federation had called for help, and humanity, after centuries of isolation, was ready to answer. Stone looked at the final line of the alien message. The coordinates where their fleets would meet. "Send the reply," he ordered. "Tell them we're coming." Because humanity had never forgotten how to fight. They had never stopped being what their harsh world had made them. And now, the Deathworlders were going to war. Deep within Europa's ice-covered ocean, Captain James Walker opened his eyes for the first time in 50 years. The cryopod's lid slid open with a soft hiss, and the familiar smell of recycled air filled his lungs. His body felt heavy, but his mind was sharp. The military's advanced cryo-technology had done its job well. "Welcome back, Captain," said the medical officer, Dr. Mary Hall. She helped him sit up, checking his vital signs. "How do you feel?" "Like I went to sleep yesterday," Walker replied, his voice rough from disuse. "Has it happened? The call we waited for?" Dr. Hall nodded. "They need us, Captain. All of us." Around them, other cryopods were opening. Hundreds of Earth's best ship commanders and crew members were waking up. They had volunteered for this duty, agreeing to sleep until humanity needed them. Some had families who had grown old while they slept, but they had all known the price when they volunteered. In orbit above Mars, the massive shipyards hidden on Phobos and Deimos revealed themselves. Mechanical arms pulled away the fake asteroid covers, showing rows of waiting warships. They weren't beautiful like the Federation's ships. They were built for war. Thick armor, multiple backup systems, and weapon ports covering every angle. They looked like the sharks of space, deadly and efficient. General Stone stood in the command center, watching the fleet come to life. Beside him, Admiral Reed studied the tactical displays showing their ships' positions. "The Federation representatives will be here in 6 hours," Reed said. "They're in for quite a surprise." Stone nodded. "How many ships are ready?" 200 heavy combat vessels, 400 support ships, and 1,000 automated drone ships, Reed answered. "Plus the new weapons we developed based on the old Federation data. We've been busy while pretending to be primitive." The Federation diplomats arrived in a ship that looked like a floating crystal palace. It landed at the Mars spaceport, where Earth's military leadership waited to meet them. The aliens stepped out cautiously. Bright Star led them, his feathers tight against his body in the higher gravity. He looked at the humans waiting for them, then at the massive warships now visible in orbit. "Impossible," he whispered. "Your people were supposed to be primitive, isolated. We've watched your broadcasts, your daily life. There were no signs of this level of technology." General Stone smiled. "We've had 300 years to prepare, Council member. We knew someday the galaxy would need what Earth had taught us. Everything you saw was real, but it wasn't everything we are." They moved to a conference room where Walker and other fleet commanders waited. On screens around them, more ships appeared from hidden bases across the solar system. Some emerged from Jupiter's clouds, others from Saturn's rings. Each one was built to survive whatever the universe could throw at them. "Your ships," Bright Star said, studying the designs. "They're so heavily armored. Our vessels focus on shields and energy weapons." "Shields can fail," Walker explained. "Armor and backup systems keep you alive when everything else goes wrong. We learned that the hard way on Earth." He brought up the tactical displays, showing their fleet formations. "We have ships that can fight for months without resupply. Crews trained to survive if their life support fails. Weapons that don't need power to work. Because on Earth, we learned to prepare for the worst." The Federation representatives watched in silence as more ships joined the fleet. They had expected to find barely civilized warriors. Instead, they found an army that had spent centuries preparing for this moment. "How?" one of them finally asked. "How did you hide all this?" Admiral Reed stepped forward. "Because we remembered something you forgot. Peace is precious, but it survives only if you're ready to defend it. We never stopped being what our world made us. Survivors, fighters, protectors." He looked out at the assembled fleet, now forming up for their first mission. "We're ready to help defend your worlds. But you need to understand something. We're not just coming to fight. We're coming to teach you how to survive." The fleet was ready. Humanity's greatest ships and best warriors were awake and prepared for battle. Now it was time to show the galaxy what a species born on a death world could really do. The Federation emergency rally point was a space station orbiting a dead world. As the human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel, the gathered alien ships moved back in alarm. Captain Walker watched from the bridge of his flagship, the Thunder, as the station's sensors scanned their vessels. "They're afraid of us," said his first officer, Jack Miller. "Look at how they're positioning their ships." Walker nodded. The Federation vessels were beautiful, like art pieces made of crystal and light, but they were keeping their distance from the human fleet, which looked dark and threatening in comparison. The Thunder alone was twice the size of their largest ships, its hull scarred from test battles and training exercises. "Opening communication channel," reported the comm officer. "Federation station is hailing us." The main screen lit up, showing Bright Star and several other alien leaders. Their expressions were hard to read, but their body language showed clear nervousness. "Welcome to Alliance Station," Bright Star said formally. "We hadn't expected quite so many ships." "This is just the first wave," Walker replied calmly. "The rest of the fleet is securing your outer colonies. We don't leave anything to chance." The aliens' nervousness increased when the human crews started arriving at the station for joint planning sessions. The Federation species needed special breathing equipment in their ships. The oxygen levels humans preferred would poison them. They watched in shock as humans casually lifted equipment that would require their powered suits, and showed no signs of fatigue in the station's higher gravity. During the first tactical meeting, Walker laid out the human battle plan. "We'll form a defensive line here," he said, pointing to a star map. "Our heavy ships will engage the enemy directly while your faster vessels—" "Directly engage," interrupted a crystalline alien commander. "But the enemy destroys everything that gets close. We lost entire fleets trying to fight them directly." Walker smiled grimly. "With energy weapons and shields, yes. But we don't rely on those. Show them, Miller." Miller brought up footage from their weapon tests. Rails guns firing projectiles at incredible speeds. Missiles designed to penetrate energy shields. Armor that could take hits that would vaporize Federation ships. "This is barbaric," whispered one alien leader. "Such physical weapons, so much potential for destruction." "Barbaric works," Walker replied. "Your weapons are elegant, but they're predictable. Sometimes the old ways are best." The tension grew when Lieutenant Tom Rogers demonstrated human combat techniques to a mixed-species security team. The aliens were horrified by how quickly humans could move in combat, how much damage they could take and keep fighting. "Your people are bleeding," exclaimed a security officer named Swiftwind, pointing at the scratches and bruises on the human soldiers after a training session. "We must call medical aid." Rogers laughed, wiping away some blood. This is nothing. Humans heal fast. We evolved to take damage and keep going." The real shock came during an emergency drill. A power failure shut down part of the station's life support. While Federation crews scrambled for their environmental suits, the humans simply held their breath and kept working, lasting minutes without air. "How is this possible?" Brightstar asked Walker later. "Your people treated a life-threatening emergency as a minor inconvenience." "Because on Earth, everything tried to kill us," Walker explained. "High gravity made us strong. Predators made us tough. Changing weather made us adaptable. We survived because we had to, and we got stronger because of it." He looked out at the stars, where the enemy waited. "You called us because you needed warriors. This is what warriors from a death world look like. We're not pretty, we're not elegant, but we survive. And we'll teach you to survive too." The Federation leaders began to understand. These humans weren't just strong. They were shaped by a world that had forced them to become strong. Everything about them, from their ships to their bodies, was built to endure and overcome. As the first reports of enemy movement came in, Walker gathered his crew. "They're about to see what humans can really do," he told them. "Let's show them why Earth was called a death world." The time for planning was over. Now it was time for the Deathworlders to prove their worth in battle. The enemy ships appeared like holes in space, darker than the darkness between stars. Captain Walker watched them approach on the Thunder's main screen. Behind his fleet, the Federation ships hung back, their crews still unsure about human battle tactics. "All ships, battle stations," Walker ordered. "Remember your training. These things might be alien, but they can die like anything else." The enemy fleet moved closer. The Federation had named them Voidborn, and now Walker could see why. Their ships seemed to bend light around them, making them hard to look at directly. "They're powering up their weapons," Miller reported from his station. "Energy readings are off the charts." "Just like we expected," Walker nodded. "Launch the drones." 1,000 small ships shot forward from the human fleet. They were simple machines, guided by basic computers. Each one carried a single purpose: to show how the enemy fought. The Voidborn ships fired. Beams of strange energy cut through space, turning the drones into dust. But Walker smiled. The Thunder sensors recorded everything. "Look at that," he said, pointing to the data. "They don't just stop energy weapons. They eat them. Feed on them. No wonder the Federation's weapons didn't work." He opened a channel to the fleet. "All ships, switch to kinetic weapons only. Rail guns and mass drivers. Fire on my mark." The Federation commanders watched in shock as the human fleet moved forward. No one had ever survived direct combat with the Voidborn. "They're going to be destroyed," Brightstar whispered on the command channel. "Captain, please fall back." "Watch and learn," Walker replied. "Thunder, fire main guns." The Thunder's rail guns roared to life. Massive rounds of dense metal shot out at speeds that would crack a planet. Behind him, the rest of the fleet opened fire. Space itself seemed to shake with the barrage. The Voidborn tried to stop the attack like they had stopped everything else. But physical objects didn't vanish into their void fields. The rounds smashed into their ships, tearing through their strange armor. Direct hits, Miller shouted. Their shields can't stop physical objects. The enemy fleet changed formation, trying to adapt. But humans had been fighting wars for their entire history. Walker's fleet split into smaller groups, attacking from multiple angles. When the Voidborn focused on one group, another would strike their weak spots. Look at their pattern, Walker said, studying the enemy movements. They fight like one mind. No individual thinking. That's a weakness we can use. He ordered his ships to act independently, each commander making their own decisions. The Voidborn couldn't predict what the humans would do because every ship fought differently. The Federation fleet watched in amazement as the human ships dove and weaved through space, firing their primitive weapons. The Voidborn, used to enemies that ran away, didn't know how to handle enemies that charged straight at them. First blood is ours, Walker announced as the first enemy ship exploded. Its death wasn't pretty like Federation ships that broke into beautiful crystals. The Voidborn ship simply ceased to exist, leaving a hole in space that slowly filled in. But the victory came with a price. 3 human ships were destroyed, their crews lost to the void. The Federation commanders were shocked when the human fleet didn't retreat. "You've lost ships," Swift Wind said on the command channel. "Surely you must withdraw now." "No," Walker replied firmly. "We knew there would be losses. Every crew member knew the risks. We honor their sacrifice by finishing the mission." The battle continued for hours. The Voidborn tried every trick they knew. Energy weapons, void fields, even trying to swallow ships whole. But human weapons kept firing, human ships kept fighting, and human crews refused to give up. Finally, the remaining enemy ships retreated, disappearing into the darkness they came from. The human fleet regrouped, damaged but victorious. "This is why Earth is called a death world," Walker told the stunned Federation commanders. "Not just because our world is harsh, but because it taught us to never stop fighting. No matter the cost, no matter the odds, we keep going." The Federation fleet moved forward to join them, their crews seeing humans in a new light. These weren't just strong warriors. They were survivors who had turned their world's harshness into strength. And they had just proven that the Voidborn could be beaten. Again. Lieutenant Tom Rogers shouted, "Your enemy won't give you a second chance." The mixed team of human and Federation soldiers ran through the combat course for the 10th time. Swift Wind, now leading the alien warriors, was learning fast. His natural speed and agility, combined with human combat techniques, made him a fearsome fighter. "Better," Rogers nodded as the team finished. "You're starting to think like survivors now." In the shipyards above the station, human engineers were helping modify Federation vessels. They weren't trying to copy human ships. Instead, they were teaching the aliens how to make their own designs tougher. "See this crystal structure?" Jack Miller explained to a group of Federation engineers. "Beautiful, but one hit and it shatters. But if we add these support beams here," he pointed to the modifications, "now it flexes instead of breaking." Sometimes bending is better than standing firm. The Federation crews were quick learners. Their elegant technology, combined with human practical knowledge, created something new. Ships that were both beautiful and tough. Weapons that used their energy technology, but couldn't be absorbed by the Voidborn. Captain Walker watched from the command center as the first joint training exercises began. Human ships flew alongside Federation vessels, teaching them battle formations that the Voidborn couldn't predict. "Your people learned fast," he told Bright Star, who stood beside him. "You're natural survivors. You just needed to remember how." "We had forgotten," Bright Star admitted. "1,000 years of peace made us soft. But watching your people, it reminds us of our own histories. Every species had to fight to survive once." The biggest change came in how the Federation crews thought about combat. Humans taught them that retreat wasn't failure. It was a chance to come back stronger. That losing a battle didn't mean losing the war. That being afraid was normal, but controlling that fear was what made a warrior. In the medical bay, Dr. Hall was teaching Federation doctors about human healing techniques. Sometimes the old ways work best, she explained, showing them how to make emergency bandages. Energy healing is great, but what happens when power fails? You need backups for your backups. Lieutenant Anna Foster led a special mission team, mixing the best qualities of both human and alien fighters. The Federation soldiers were faster and could sense energy fields. Humans were stronger and could fight longer. Together, they were better than either could be alone. Move like water, strike like stone, Foster taught them, using an old Earth saying. Use what makes you different as your strength. The Federation ships began to change. Their crystal hulls now had layers of armor underneath. Their energy weapons were backed up by physical guns. Their crews trained for combat without their advanced technology, learning to survive with just their bodies and minds. Watch how they target our engines, Walker explained during a training battle. They think like one mind, so they attack the same way. That's why we fight differently. Every ship, every soldier must think for themselves. The Federation leaders were amazed at how humans could take damage and keep fighting. During one exercise, a Federation ship lost power. Its crew panicked until they remembered their human training. They fixed what they could, adapted to what they couldn't fix, and completed their mission. That's the secret, Rogers told his mixed team after a hard training session. It's not about being the strongest or having the best weapons. It's about never giving up. That's what Earth taught us. Swiftwind nodded, understanding at last. Your world tried to kill you every day, but you learned from it instead of running from it. Exactly, Rogers smiled. And now you're learning too. Not to be like us, but to find your own strength. As reports came in of more Voidborn ships approaching, the Federation fleet was ready. They weren't just copying human tactics. They had created their own way of fighting. They had remembered what their ancestors knew. Survival wasn't just about being strong. It was about being willing to fight. The next battle would show if the students had learned their lessons well. The battle wasn't going well. Captain Walker watched as another human ship exploded, torn apart by the Voidborn's new weapons. The enemy had adapted, learning from their earlier defeats. Now they were using gravity itself as a weapon, crushing ships with invisible forces. Third Fleet is falling back, Miller reported, his voice tight with tension. The Voidborn have changed their tactics. They're not fighting as one mind anymore. They're copying our independence. Walker gripped his command chair as the thunder shook from another near miss. The enemy had learned too well. They were using human tactics against them, fighting unpredictably, striking from multiple angles. Federation ships are holding the line, Swiftwind reported from his ship. His crew had fought bravely, but even their improved vessels were struggling. But we can't break through their new defenses. In the tactical room of Alliance Station, Lieutenant Foster studied the enemy movements with growing concern. Her mixed-species strike team had tried 3 different raids, but the Voidborn defenses were too strong. Look at this, she said, pointing to the sensor data. They're not just adapting. They're evolving. Every time we destroy one, the others learn from it. The Federation Council was meeting in emergency session. The combined fleet had lost 30 ships in the last battle alone. Even human determination had its limits. We need to retreat, one council member argued. Fall back to the core worlds, build stronger defenses. There is nowhere to retreat to, Bright Star countered. The Voidborn will follow us. They'll keep coming until they've consumed everything. Walker arrived at the council chamber, his uniform still dirty from the last battle. I have a plan, he announced, but you're not going to like it. He laid out his idea. The Thunder would leave a suicide run straight into the heart of the Voidborn fleet. While the enemy was distracted, Foster's strike team would board the largest enemy ship. They had detected strange energy readings from it, possibly a control center. This is madness, a Federation commander protested. You'll lose your entire crew. Maybe, Walker agreed. But every crew member aboard the Thunder volunteered when they heard the plan. This is what we do. We find a way, no matter the cost. Foster's team began preparing for their mission. Humans and Federation soldiers working together, checking equipment, saying quiet goodbyes. They all knew most of them wouldn't return. Why? Swiftwind asked Foster as they checked their weapons. Why sacrifice so much? Because that's what Earth taught us, she replied. Sometimes you have to risk everything to save what matters. Our world tried to kill us every day. We learned that survival sometimes requires sacrifice. In the medical bay, Dr. Hall prepared her staff for the casualties they knew were coming. Federation doctors worked alongside human medics, ready to save whoever they could. Set course for the enemy fleet, Walker ordered as the Thunder moved into position. All hands, battle stations. Today we show them what humanity's last resort looks like. The massive ship turned, its engines glowing brightly. Behind it, Federation ships moved to protect Foster's smaller vessel as it prepared for its own mission. The Voidborn ships shifted, sensing something was different about this attack. They're preparing something big, Miller warned, looking at the enemy fleet. Those energy readings are off the charts. Good, Walker said grimly. Let them use their best weapons. We'll show them the humans are most dangerous when we have nothing left to lose. He opened a channel to the entire fleet. We all knew this day might come. The enemy thinks they've learned all our tricks. They think they know what we're capable of. He paused, looking at his crew's determined faces. Let's show them how wrong they are. The Thunder's engines roared to full power. Behind it, Foster's team prepared to launch. The next few hours would determine the fate of both humanity and the Federation. Sometimes, the only way to win was to be willing to lose everything. The Thunder charged straight into the heart of the Voidborn fleet. Its guns blazed, drawing all attention to itself. Captain Walker stood on his bridge, watching the enemy ships surround him. All power to forward shields, he ordered. Draw them in closer. Lieutenant Foster needs more time. The massive ship pushed forward, taking hits that would have destroyed any other vessel. Behind the enemy fleet, Foster's small ship slipped through the chaos, carrying her mixed team of human and Federation warriors. We're detecting a power surge from the enemy flagship, Miller reported. It's like nothing we've seen before. The Voidborn ships were gathering energy, preparing to destroy the Thunder with one massive strike. But Walker smiled. Everything was going according to plan. At that moment, a new fleet appeared behind the battle. Admiral Reed had arrived with Earth's reserve forces, 1,000 ships that had been waiting for this moment. But these weren't normal warships. They carried humanity's darkest weapons, things they had developed but hoped never to use. This is Admiral Reed to all ships. His voice came over the command channel. Deploy the void mines. Operation Dark Star is now active. Small objects launched from the human ships, looking harmless at first. But when they activated, they created tiny black holes that lasted just seconds, long enough to tear apart anything nearby. The Voidborn tried to absorb the energy, but there was no energy to absorb. Just pure gravity, the same force they had been using against the human fleet. Meanwhile, Foster's team had reached the enemy flagship. Using Federation technology combined with human determination, they cut their way inside. The ship's interior was strange, more like living tissue than metal. Look at these readings, Swiftwind said, scanning the walls. This ship, it's alive. The whole fleet is connected to it. Foster nodded. Then we know our target. Plant the charges where they'll do the most damage. The Thunder was badly damaged now, but it had done its job. The Voidborn were so focused on destroying it that they didn't notice Foster's team hitting their weak point. Hull breach on decks 3 through 7, Miller reported. We can't take much more of this. We don't need to, Walker replied. We just need to keep their attention a little longer. In the enemy flagship, Foster's team reached the central chamber. There they found something unexpected. A single creature, massive and alien, connected to the ship by countless tendrils. It's a hive mind, Swiftwind realized. One being controlling the entire fleet. Foster didn't hesitate. Plant the charges. All of them. Her team worked quickly, placing explosives around the chamber. The creature seemed to sense their presence at last, but it was too late. Thunder, pull back now. Foster radioed as her team ran for their ship. We found their weakness. Walker ordered an immediate retreat. As the thunder pulled away, Foster's charges detonated. The explosion wasn't big, but it didn't need to be. The creature's death scream echoed through space, and every Voidborn ship suddenly lost its coordination. All ships, open fire. Admiral Reed ordered. Everything you have. The combined human and Federation fleet attacked. Without their central control, the Voidborn ships fought randomly, confused. The Void Mines tore their fleet apart while conventional weapons finished the job. Foster's ship escaped just before the enemy flagship collapsed in on itself. The remaining Voidborn ships tried to flee but found themselves trapped by the same gravity weapons they had used earlier. When it was over, the Federation Council gathered on Alliance Station. The victory had cost many lives, but they had won. Humanity had proved itself not just as warriors, but as protectors. We would like to formally invite Earth to join the Federation, Bright Star announced. Not as subjects, but as equals. As teachers. Walker looked at his fellow commanders, then at the Federation leaders. We accept, but on one condition. The Federation must never forget these lessons. Peace is precious, but it survives only if you're ready to defend it. The Federation agreed. They had learned that sometimes the most dangerous species could be the best allies. That strength wasn't just about power, but about the will to use it wisely. And so the Deathworlders took their place among the stars, ready to defend their new allies. Because that's what Earth had taught them. You fight not just to survive, but to protect others. The galaxy would never be the same. And that was a good thing.